Donald Trump and his Republican allies have been trying to paint Kamala Harris as a far-left California liberal, even a communist, all caps, while her campaign had thus far been more about vibes than policy. She did release an economic plan a couple of weeks ago. It calls for an expanded child tax credit, incentives to increase housing supply, and a law banning price gouging on groceries, an idea that some have labeled as price controls. So is this, Jennifer, is this a serious economic plan or is it a campaign gimmick?
It's a campaign gimmick. You know, I have been watching the Democrats and Republicans debate and compete about who's defining the economy and who really has the economic message, who can address the public's pain, because there is a lot of pain, and there has been really since 2008. The economic collapse happened, and really since then our economy has been weak, and the Democrats have struggled through the last 2 decades to really figure out how to tell a story that ordinary people will understand. Trump has been incredibly effective at having a clear, simple, forward message that he repeats endlessly. And the Democrats don't have that. They don't have a simple message. They don't have a clear plan. The Harris policies, from my perspective, are gimmicky. They're not anything that will truly revolutionize or think differently about how the economy functions in the United States.
Now, as you started to make that, I could see Rip sort of drop his head a little bit.
No, most of this is for political purposes. This is populism. Other than, you know, the child tax credit, increasing that, I think most of this, you know, let's go back to her in Nevada telling, you know, that we shouldn't be taxing tips. People are unhappy about the price of groceries. Oh, it's the big bad grocery stores, and we're going to crack down on price gouging. Housing, an interesting issue. There she has a worthy goal, but most of the things that she's promoting, giving $25,000 to first-time home buyers, is only going to increase the demand for housing and push prices up more. And most of the impediments to housing, which we've talked about on this show many, many times, are state and local, and the federal government's going to have absolutely no power over fixing.
So are you essentially saying it's agreeing with Jenny that it's a gimmick, or are you saying it's a policy but it's a bad policy?
No, well, it's a little bit of both. Much of this is populism. Arguments to make people feel better, and I don't think are going to go forward. Some of them, though, are bad policy.
Well, the expanded child tax credit, when that was in place previously as part of pandemic relief, I believe that would, and Harris will say this over and over again, raised a third of America's children out of poverty, or some statistic somewhat like that. Michael?
Well, I think when we talk about Trump's message and being consistent, the only thing consistent about it is anger, grievance, and anger. That's the only thing that's been consistent about it. And let's be clear here. He's had 8 years to develop an economic message. She's barely had 4 weeks. So let's be understanding about that. Now, what's impressive about what she's done is how she sort of shifted gears and tied herself to some of the successes of the infrastructure bill. I see a message starting to develop, such as inflation is easing, help is on the way. Right? Interest rates are easing, help is on the way, right? Prescription drug prices are being negotiated. Insulin is $35, help is on the way. If you vote for me, more help is on the way. I see that sort of message starting to develop, which I think will take hold, to Jennifer's point, right? And I think that also, when you look at the Harris campaign, it is extremely mature for being 30 days out in public versus 8 years of childish, petulant nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly the flip, I shouldn't say flip, but just starting from nothing and hitting the ground running, to use a cliche. I mean, she's been pretty remarkable in that.
Absolutely. But she was vice president for 4 years. Let's not say she was sitting...
100%. And she's carrying forward the messaging from the Biden campaign, actually. There's not anything particularly novel or new yet in anything she's offering.
Right. And she did do that interview last night on CNN, and the interviewer asked her at one point about Bidenomics. Yep. So I'll throw it to you on that note, Tara.
Okay. No, the only comment I wanted to make was in terms of something that Rick was saying in terms of the reality of what she's proposing. And let's remember, this is proposal. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and she's in a position where she can do this, is throw some proposals out, because then, if she wins, she can say, okay, this was my proposal. This sort of sounds outlandish, okay? And I'll just take the housing, for example. I believe she wants to see, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the number, 4 million new home builds.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's pretty unrealistic if you think about the fact that it's between 1.4 and 1.5 new home builds, per year.
Yeah.
But what that does is it also gives her some negotiating range. So if she becomes president, she can, no one thinks she's really going to, be able to get home builders to do this. But if she's trying to work with a Congress and, whether it's a Democratic-led Congress or a Republican-led Congress, both are going to be looking to the next congressional elections. Mm-hmm. This gives some room where maybe she can get, it might not be 4 million, but even if she gets 0.5 million or 1 million, she can say, I compromised with Congress and I also kept my promise. Mm-hmm. So I see these things as things she's throwing out there as potential proposals so that if I win, I have a base where I can start.
So her proposals do have, would you agree, Rick, a pretty active state, a state role in the economy, which is something that doesn't really fly in America.
Right. You're going to see, again, especially with housing, again, as Tara said, very good goal, unrealistic, but also I don't think she has the power to bring about much of what she would like. It's up to state and local governments to reduce the regulations, the red tape, the impediments to increasing the supply of housing, which is what we need.
But what about the idea of the grocery prices and food prices? And she's talking about price gouging. Is that, are we really seeing that, or is that the gimmick that you were referring to?
Yeah, I think going back to your point, it's a nice populist message, but it doesn't have real practical consequence, and that's not the problem. The reasons that we're having the continued inflation is much more complex than price gouging. And I think what concerns me is that if Harris doesn't articulate very clearly and repeatedly what her policies are going to be as president, Trump is going to define them for her. And she is at risk with the banal, the interview last night, it was very banal. I didn't hear any concrete policy positions. And it really leaves the Democratic Party open to the Republicans making labels like communism and whatever, because there isn't any clear counter message.
I'll tell you one thing, though. At least she's not calling people childless cat ladies and desecrating veterans' graves. I will give her that. There's a maturity to her campaign in its nascent stages. I'll give her that.